for everyone listening, because I'm an asshole and I'm going to introduce you, is, yeah, Dale texted me like, whenever you, me, Ted, I, and Dale did that episode last week or 2 weeks ago. I hadn't talked to Dale since he moved back to Bali, however you say it. And he just texted me one day and was just like, hey, we're doing an episode Wednesday. I was like, okay. I just texted someone I was having on that Wednesday. I was like, hey, I got to bump you. And, when Dale comes ringing, you don't ignore the call. But he said he wanted to have you on. I didn't know you, but, if Dale vouches for anyone, I blanket have just implicitly trust. And who knows, maybe that will lead to my downfall, but I trust Dale implicitly. So, yeah, he wanted you on. You came on and we talked a little bit, but when I have more than one person on, it gets a little crazy. When I have 4 people on, it definitely gets a little crazy. And when 2 of those 4 people are Dale Comstock and Joe Tedeye, it's just fucking, I'm not in the driver's seat, and I love it. That's why I love having them on, because it's a departure from the normal. That being said, I was like, I wanna get to know you more. Not that it was any sort of like, I need to know who you are. I don't give a fuck. I just want to get to know you more. I rarely have multiple people on when it's the first time I meet them. So, yeah, from our last episode, did it stop? I thought I stopped recording. For episode 191, you introduced yourself, Sam Culper, Army Intel, I believe, Afghanistan, Iraq, and came back and you started Forward Observer, which, if I'm not too stupid to link it together, it reminds me of Mike Baker, the CIA guy that's on Joe Rogan. Kind of sounds like that kind of thing. But it's now been 1 minute and 45 seconds. I haven't let you say a fucking word. So how would you introduce yourself, my friend?
Okay, yeah, great. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
I get the opportunity to do a lot of interviews, but I really like them. So thanks for having me on. I mean, this is as much for me, as it is for you now. So
Sure.
Yeah. Sam Culper, I was an intelligence analyst, both in the military and in the Army and as a contractor. And I did military intelligence. So basically everything I did had some level of defense.
Sure.
Was in the realm of defense.
Sure. And what? Yeah, I mean, I've had on a while back Nick Phelps and Dan Libby, both were Air Force Intel. I mean, it's pretty limited what they can tell me. But what I was more interested in is, because how old are you? Is there any, 30, 35, 40?
Mid-30s.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm 30, right? And so to me, I was just interesting because it was like, you came back and you started a company. And I was just like, right. More than anything, that's what interests me. It's because, I'm like a broken fucking record. I got into med school out of college, but decided not to go. That was 7 years ago. And I'm trying to form this into my own revenue stream. So anyone that's kind of just, holding up middle fingers to the normal rat race interests me. But especially because, you're someone that Dale recommended me to. So, but yeah, can you just go into what Forward Observer is? It just, because I've looked at it, I've seen the packets and shit. I've seen, it seems like it's almost like civilian intel, right? It's like, if I could put it into stupid layman's words, it'd be that's it's like your own little, it's like a civilian. Yeah, like a civilian intelligence. If you wanted to, am I butchering that? Am I a moron? Is it too early? Am I not awake yet?
No, yeah, that's right. We focus on domestic issues. So 2016 is when I started it. I left the intelligence community in 2012.
Okay.
And I kind of fumbled around for a bit. I just gotten back a few months prior from Afghanistan as a contractor, and so I said, okay, I'm just going to go. I got burnt out. I got tired of deploying, and I got burnt out with work, and I said, all right. I want to leave the intel business. So I moved to Wyoming, became a fly fishing guide, and I thought, hey, I do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Turns out I enjoy fishing more than I enjoy taking other people to fish.
Yeah.
And so, So in 2014, I really started training people, teaching intelligence for a living, mainly in the preparedness community. I say the preparedness community, and I'm not talking about doomsday preppers. I'm talking about physicians, attorneys, engineers, like people who are putting the puzzle together on their own, and they're like, hey, there's some things that concern us about what's going on.
It's not all sunny. Yeah.
That's right. And so, yes, I started teaching them. And then in 2016, I kept getting questions about, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I said, well, look, I mean, I'm an intelligence analyst.
Yeah.
What if I just take this training and skill set and experience and apply it domestically? And, this was the beginning of 2016. So we're talking about, fairly early in terms of political violence, the formation of
Antifa.
They're the 3%ers, and then there was the leftist groups, anti-fascist groups that started popping up. And I started looking at this, I'm like, man, this is like the Shias and the Sunnis here.
Yeah.
It might be one day.
Yeah.
And so, in 2016, I started a weekly intelligence report. I had one, it was actually kind of morphed into two, but one that looked at international issues, more geopolitical, military developments, like with Russia and China, North Korea, Iran, and then a domestic one as well. And since then, I've really just been focusing on the domestic picture. What are the indicators of political, social, and economic instability, and where are we going to be 6 or 12, 18, 24 months from now? Okay. What is this country going to look like? Are we actually going to stumble into domestic conflict?
Okay.
And that is the brunt of my work today.
Okay. So yeah, you're like a physician of sorts, right? It's not necessarily that I'm going in and I have a bullet wound through the jugular or something, but it's like you go in and it's like, all right, Mr. Kerrigan, like blood pressure's a little high, like you got a spot on your skin, but like ultimately you're well. Like, take a baby aspirin, maybe, lay off the Twinkies, you fat fuck, and go for a walk, you glutton. But, we got it, right? It's not like, it's not like they look at me and then they go like, I need you to sign this piece of paper right now because you're going into surgery, right? It's because that does happen. You're looking at more of like you're checking the vitals, and it's like, where does statistically, like as a physician, where does this statistically show us that you're going, right? You've got whatever, you maybe got a clot in your brain, or maybe you just got, it might be simple. Hey, like that's going to be a cavity in a month. It might be more like that's going to be a pulmonary embolism in a month. But am I getting that right?
Yeah. We keep the pulse.
Yeah.
Keeping the pulse of conflict is kind of the term we've kicked around for a while. Yeah.
I got you. Now, because I'm a moron and I never know like what questions I'm allowed to ask and stuff. Like I've had I tried it for July 16th, the 75th anniversary of the first A-bomb test. I was calling like Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. I was trying to get Sandia. I was trying to get all these nuclear weapons physicists to come on, and a lot of them said yes. And then I would start sending them lists of questions about stuff that I now know is highly, highly classified. And not only could they not talk about that, they couldn't talk about the fact that they couldn't talk about it because that implies its existence. So I've slowly learned like who I have on. I called Northrop Grumman, tried to get him to talk to me about the B-21. That wasn't good, and I got chewed out. But that being said, I'm trying to like learn a way to kind of weave around what I can and can't ask about without being too stupid about it, or just giving away, I don't know, just your business. You don't want to give that away. So what are the if you don't want to answer things, and like I tell everyone, this isn't live. Sometimes people ask for stuff to be spliced out. If you want it spliced out, you tell me. But so what are some of like the indicators you look at? Is that what you can talk about at all? Certainly.
Yep. So the first thing that I do is I look at a model. What we've gathered all this evidence, observational evidence, and I say, okay, what does this most likely resemble? What kind of conflict are we talking about? Are there historical precedents? Are there defense doctrines that describe what's going on? And the answer is yes. And so what I started doing is looking for indicators of low intensity conflict, right? So low intensity conflict exists below the threshold of conventional war. So we're not talking about bombers and tanks in the streets and stuff.
Sure.
But it exists above routine peaceful competition. And as I tell audiences frequently, we're not at war, but there's not a sane individual in the United States who can say that this country is currently at peace. And this is the gray zone between Cold War and and hot war
Yeah.
that is low intensity conflict. So violence is not the most predominant expression of warfare in low intensity conflict. We're talking about political warfare and economic warfare, information, diplomatic warfare. And so I guess the indicators are, I mean, there's lots of indicators. I think I'm hesitant to really go kind of like wade waist deep into the debate on is there a deep state? I think the bureaucracy is, but I think I would characterize what happened over the past several years as a soft coup. And so that to me is indicative of, well, there's obviously political warfare.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of political warfare going on.
Yeah.
I look at a lot of the, people getting fired from their jobs, people getting deplatformed, kicked off of sourcing websites. And that is economic warfare. Yeah. It's economic dislocation. People are trying to separate their political or ideological enemies from their sources of income.
Yeah.
Disrupt their livelihood. That's economic warfare.
That is 1,000% warfare.
Oh yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah, it absolutely is. You're trying to limit the ability of your enemy to influence the battle space, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of information warfare, diplomatic warfare. Essentially the same thing that's happening in the United States is happening in Europe right now. Essentially between the left and the right, nationalism versus globalism. And so, at any rate, I look at all that stuff and I cataloged it much more deeply, and I came to the conclusion after looking at these indicators. Yeah, there absolutely is. We absolutely are in a low intensity conflict right now. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, it absolutely does. But yeah, the way you said it, I don't know what that wording was that made it click in my mind, but the separation of your political opponents from their source of revenue. Because, so it's like right now, what am I doing? Like I can do this podcast, but I still got to go work for 6 hours a day, right? It's if I didn't have, and that's what I always pitch at people to try to get them to invest. If I didn't have to work, I could be doing more podcasts. So let's look at it the inverse. That guy's too influential. Demonetize him, get him booted off Patreon, fuck his PayPal. Now he's got to go work. Now he can only do 2 podcasts a week. That's a lot better than 14, right? And
right. Yeah, exactly.
It's absolutely. What was the Berlin airlift in response to? Blockading. Technically we're not invading you, but we're gonna cut you off, and you're gonna die from starvation.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So that's. I didn't break your iPhone, but I did steal your charger. It's like, well, at what point are we gonna say it's semantics, and at what point is it war, right? I'm not touching you yet, Sam. I'm not touching you. I'm putting a bullet into the... I'm not touching you, Sam. I'm not fucking touching you. And don't you dare touch me, because that's assault. All right? I'm just going to rest this right on your forehead. Right? It's... And the creepiest thing is how it's starting, and it always starts the exact same. You take down one that everyone... It's very hard to argue against, right? Got to take down Alex Jones. I think he's funny. I get where he's upsetting people, but free speech isn't there to protect stuff you like. There's obviously, you can't yell fire in a theater, right? You can't call violence on certain individuals, which Twitter seems to not give a fuck about, but okay. You go for one that is going to cause the least amount of ripples, right? You have people saying, good. He's a psycho. You shouldn't be screaming about interdimensional aliens. Like, yeah, but I'm an adult. I can decide what's real for me and what's not. I don't need a nanny. But the most important thing is it's not what he's saying. It's that there is someone who has not committed a crime, and we go, tape the mask shut, tape the mouth over. And that is what's important, because if you can do that with, if you can hit, if I can throw a 90-yard Hail Mary touchdown, then I can throw an 80-yard one. I can throw a 70-yard one. So once I got that 90-yard, everything else is on the playing field, literally and figuratively. So if you can silence this guy for screaming about aliens and, false shooters and state actors, well, then you can ban this guy who, I don't know, likes to display guns and talk about how important the Second Amendment is. And you can then get the guy below him because he is for Trump, and Trump is for putting kids in cages. And then you can just very quick, once you throw the 90 yard, you can do everything else. And it's just a matter of boil the frog slowly. And that, to me, is the most insidious, terrifying thing. Is that one of your indicators? So not just actual Antifa, BLM, Proud Boys, 3%ers, actual, like, physical bodies on the street. Is that an indicator? Just censorship. Does that indicate a coming wave?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably classify that as information warfare. Yeah, not just trying to directly influence, but when you start removing voices from a national conversation, you're indirectly influencing the available narratives. Yeah.
Yes. And it's yeah, what you said about the deep state is like, that's a touchy one, because if you say deep state, people start to write you off, right?
That's right.
But that's not a secret at all. The idea who is the original deep state whistleblower? It's fucking the sitting president, Eisenhower, right? What did he say?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Warranted and unwarranted influence in our city halls from the councils of government, a technocratic military industrial complex. I mean, he was writing a speech. One of the times he was writing a speech, he was looking at, I think, a Sabre, a fighter jet going overhead, and he's like, this is what I want to say. And this is where the whole speech came from of, every fighter jet you see robbed 1,000 kids of education. He's like, what man can keep this up? That was the original deep state whistleblower. A 5-star general who led the largest amphibious invasion in the history of man. Right?
Right.
Sitting president while he did it. Blowing the whistle from the Oval Office. So it's... Do I think it's a bunch of, do I think it's some, like, Illuminati? No, I don't know. I don't think all that. But the idea that there's not an entrenched power structure that is not elected, there absolutely is. I don't think that's even up for debate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I liken it to, how you see, geese flying in formation, or, you see this, birds, right? These, what do you call a pack of birds?
Flock?
A flock, yeah. Flock. There you go. Flock of seagulls, right?
Yeah.
And they're flying, and they're all sticking together, and they're flying in the same direction, right? There's not one bird there. There's not a council of birds that are saying, hey, let's fly over here now, right? They're all acting in unison because they all are looking for food, and they're all basically trying to get to the same place.
Yes.
Especially migratory birds. They know where they're going. It's up to them to choose how to get there, and they just happen to be co-travelers.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so that's the unelected bureaucracy of people who know what the end goal is, and they're trying to get there themselves, and they just happen to be surrounded by other people who are also working for the same goal. I really think that's more the deep state, not a puppet master.
It's not a bunch of guys wearing fucking like black velvet hoods doing some eyes wide shut shit, right? Maybe. I mean, that'd be dark, but I don't think that. And my friend Trey and I talked about this. Like, I don't think it's that. I think that's too sexy and it's too easy. The answer is never that easy. I think it's probably more, it'd be like there's not a cabal of stockbrokers in some cathedral like penthouse in New York, like, we're gonna crash the finance. No, it's a bunch of guys who, and it doesn't make it right, who they see the opportunity to just steal billions. But yeah, they all happen to be going in the same direction, and it's not like, us and the Soviets were gonna build an empire. It's like, hey, we both kind of want Hitler dead, so let's do it, right? So in that sense, it's like we were the deep state to Hitler, right? We conspired. But yeah, it's not some organized, it's not, but the idea that doesn't exist, and that doesn't have wants and influences and desires, that's absolutely, I mean, what's the first thing Trump did? Well, first he took teeth off Obamacare, but he got rid of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's the first thing he did, right? And so when he's running and you have Democrats and Republicans coming out together against him, I'm like, well, if there are two people that have been fucking us for the last 80 years and they're going against him, well, I mean, I think it's like simple algebra that, okay, I think that's the guy for me, right? It's right. Granted, I like Trump. I imagine you do. So I'm going to try to steer away from that a little bit because we're just going to end up jerking each other off and not get anywhere. No intellectual discourse. But the general idea that there is a power structure. I mean, I always plug it. Raven Rock by Garrett M. Graff goes over all the nuclear bunkers in the United States, from Site R to Mount Weather to NORAD to all of them. Camp Catoctin, the one on Peanut Island for JFK. There is a relocation arc, and they quite literally have a B team, a C team, a D team of governments, which they describe as, I think it was under Truman or Eisenhower, a government on the shelf that we can dust off and have ready to go in case shit hits the fan. In more eloquent words. So I mean, the literal physical infrastructure exists for this. It is deep underground. To me, that just gives more credence to the idea that there absolutely is. There's some, and it's not a sexy Illuminati, but there is a power structure, and that they're not gonna like it when someone comes in and makes a little bit, makes too much waves. So, do you think that to bring that whole rant around, I want to relate it to Forward Observer and not necessarily to politics, but I kind of can't separate the two. Do you think that Trump is a direct threat to that, and that is perhaps the cause of the waves we see right now and have seen since 2016? I know that was like a 5-minute rant, and now I'm handing it off to you, but
yeah, I think Trump it's no secret, if you want to become wealthy, you get involved in government.
Yeah.
Because there's no amount of money in the world at any corporation that rivals the kind of budgets
$5
and the
trillion
kind of cash.
a year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think since Eisenhower, obviously, people have flocked to government to get power, influence, and money.
Yeah.
And I think Trump, who says he's going to drain the swamp, if he does or doesn't, or if he is or isn't, is completely beside the question. His stated goal is to drain the swamp, to cut people off from the government teat. Steve Bannon, when he was there, he said, look, we're going to deconstruct the administrative state.
Yeah.
That's how all those people make their money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think the deep state may be doing this for political and ideological reasons. The influencers and the opinion peddlers, the political apparatchiks, are doing it out of financial interest.
Absolutely.
I think that's at least one way to view the actual threat that Trump does present to these people.
Is turning off the faucet, right? What isn't the richest zip code in the United States the lobbying center around D.C.?
Yeah, I think it's Fairfax County, Virginia, or somewhere around there. Yeah.
Holy shit! I think, again, that's what Trey and my buddy talked about. Not to go off into the weeds, but we talked about, strap your hats on. But we talked about just like we tried to sort of desexify the explanation for why the U.S. government would withhold evidence of UFOs. And I'm not trying to turn this into a UFO episode. I do enough of those. But really quick summary is, if something gets from thousands of light years away and it gets here and it's, the size of a saucer, what does that mean? That means it has a power source, power density that far rivals even thermonuclear weapons or thermonuclear reactors, okay? If it's here, well, then you'd have to ask how it got here, that power source. And if we have it, why can't we deconstruct that power source? Well, what would that power source do? It would alleviate us from any need for fossil fuels. So if you break it down to that chain, that makes a lot of sense, because you go, oh, it's not some humanity can't handle it, it'll destabilize religion. No, it's the petrodollar. It's the grip of the petrodollar, the existing power structure. It's a lot less sexy of an answer. They're trying to hold it back because they're just like, we can't make money on it. I don't think that's what's going on. I'm not trying to tie this into UFOs. But you can take this incredibly sexy, alluring thing, and you can break it down to a pretty basic, oh, that's just humans being humans. That's what I tend to lean more towards. I think there probably is a political agenda. I think a lot of people are trying to save their fat paycheck. And we're seeing the effects of, hey, your paycheck's about to go. I think we're seeing a lot of people kind of putting their cards on the table with riots, they all have matching signs. I do graphic design. They all have matching signs, the exact same signs, printed on the exact same things, popping up at the exact same areas. I don't know. What was that U-Haul truck that got caught the other day?
Yep.
Yeah. So that being said, going from that note, just tiptoe it back around, can you look at those parameters and extrapolate what we're going to see in the next 6 months? More so than the average Joe like me can do. I can watch the debates. I can see Trump with COVID, and basically, what can you do that? And I don't mean that in a challenging way. What can you do that I'm not doing?
Question.
Yeah.
Well, what we can do is provide actual evidence for conclusions and provide details, right? I mean, it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to say people are going to go nuts if President Trump wins re-election in November. And, any casual observer can say November to January may be one of the most tumultuous periods of U.S. history.
Yeah.
What we can do is say, okay, here's what these groups are actually doing. This is where the actual cause for concern comes from. The indicators of operational support are off the charts for these leftist groups, armed leftist groups in the protest, disruptive type activists. So we can actually go through and say, are these leftist groups developing combat support, what we in the Army call combat support and combat service support classes? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. They are developing intelligence. They are developing communications. They are developing supply. They are developing transportation and logistics. They are developing medical. They're developing all of these classes of operational support. And so, then we can go in and actually look at these specific groups. Okay, well, great. How's this Portland anti-fascist or Portland anarchist group? What are they actually doing? How are they practicing intelligence? How are they practicing, here are their communication channels. Okay, why did they choose this channel? And now what does that indicate? Mm-hmm. And BLM groups especially. BLM groups have been talking specifically that, to begin preparing for sustained, you think, okay, 100 days in Portland, 100 plus days, how many ever it is now, 110, 20, whatever. That's sustained. The question is, how do you, we're talking about mobilizing an army now, mass mobilization protest. How do you field 1 million people in DC and keep them there without developing supply logistics? And, maybe some of that's going to be organic and off the cuff. And, you've got a multimillionaire, billionaire financier that says, all right, we're just going to go to a distribution center and start piping in food into DC. So I get just to reiterate the answer, the answer to the question, what can we provide, is evidence and details mm-hmm. that people who have a general sense of what's going to happen typically can't.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is providing your service for free, and if so, you don't need to answer. What is coming? And yeah.
Well, I think we're going to let's start with my highest confidence answer, which is something that the left has been talking about for a long time, and that is mass mobilization protests. Like Occupy Wall Street, orders of magnitude above Occupy Wall Street if President Trump wins. Okay. And if he wins, a week or two after the election, and they're not okay. The Biden campaign's been lawyering up. They fired at least 600 attorneys, and maybe way more than that now. They've already been deployed to state. The Trump campaign has too, by the way, but they're already writing these lawsuits and these court challenges because they've gone to these states and they can say, okay, how are all the ways that things could go awry in these states? And so they'll just start drafting up these lawsuits for all these contingencies of what could go wrong. And the thing is, we're in this territory now of it doesn't even have to be a legitimate failure. As long as there is a perception of a failure, then they can file the lawsuit. And if they lose in court, they'll try to win in the streets. And this is not me. This is what they've been saying essentially. Yeah. So the first thing is, like a lot of people said, okay, legal battles. This election may come down to the Supreme Court. It may come down to state Supreme Courts. Mass mobilization protests is the highest confidence answer I have.
Sure.
Below that is disruption. I think there's a very good possibility, probably somewhere on the order of 60 to 70%, that the left, if President Trump wins, the left will try to severely disrupt the economy.
Okay.
The far left has been talking about shutting down the ports. They've been talking about a general strike, basically having everyone walk away from their jobs if President Trump wins. Some of the ends are, well, we've got to force President Trump out, right? We bring the country to a halt, and this is what they say. We bring the country to a halt, and President Trump will leave office. That's kind of their Hail Mary. Can't do it legally. We got to do it in the streets. Yeah. So disruption of commercial and financial interests, I think is there's a decent chance that happens if President Trump is reelected. Behind that, we have armed political violence, the revolutionaries. And this is pretty significantly far behind. But the question I've been asking since 2016 is, are we, and when will we get, if we will get there, when will we get to organized political violence? And I'm not talking about 1861. I'm talking like the Irish Troubles. You know, Brian Burroughs has that great book called Days of Rage.
Okay.
In the first 18 months of 1971 and 1972, there were over 2,500 domestic bombings. Now, most of those didn't kill anybody, but they're all targeted towards government or the military. And could we get to that point again if President Trump gets reelected? Yeah, maybe. So that's kind of a range of scenarios. You know, there's kind of this CYA thing in intelligence, right? I don't want to tell someone this is the one thing that I think is going to happen. What I'd rather do is give you a range of potential outcomes or potential courses of action and say, this is what I believe is the most likely course of action, you know, down to less likely or least likely courses of action.
Sure.
And then, of course, the most dangerous course of action is that there will be assassinations and sabotage and terrorism if President Trump gets reelected. It's not the most likely, but that's probably I think that is the most dangerous.
Sure. Because
there are a lot of conservatives out there, a lot of veterans as well, who are not going to allow that to happen.
No.
With no response.
No. That was a beautiful answer, by the way. It's it's kind of like the one friend you have, right? It's like a gentle giant who, you know, it takes a lot to push him over the edge. And maybe you've only seen him blow his stack once or twice in 20 years. But both times you've seen it, someone gets like knocked out and put in the hospital. And I'm not trying to sound like Mr. Tough Guy, because it's not me. Right. But I mean, I look at the friends I have, look at the family members, look at the swaths of veteran friends I have, excluding the guys I've had on this podcast who are just, I mean, fucking dude, straight up fucking tip of the spear killers.
Jumping at the bit, yeah. Right.
I mean, he's a goddamn Rottweiler, and right now there's just, people are throwing steak, and they're like, none of the dogs are coming yet. And I'm like, because they're very well trained. But goddamn it, if you give them a reason to come off the leash, like, God bless, right? I'll say your funeral. They're like, what funeral? I'm like, I'll say it. Don't worry. I'll comfort your mom. Like, that being said, and not only that, I mean, what? The U.S. has 5% of the world's population, 25% of the civilian-owned guns. It's insane. We have 5% of the world's population. I want to say 48% of the world's civilian-owned ammunition. And I can tell you right now that half of the country aren't the ones that own those because they've spent the last 7 decades screaming against them. So, whereas, to me, they may be pushing and pushing and pushing, but holy shit, if you finally get someone to push back, I mean, it's going to be a massacre, and I'm not for that. I don't mean to sound like some jerking off, like, oh yeah, we're going to smash the left, because that doesn't solve anything. Now we just have a bunch of dead people. That doesn't solve anything. And like I said in the last episode, we're not in a vacuum. There are external powers that are very just loving the idea of us going at it. But it's
right. Can I just interject one thing? Real quick?
Whatever you want, man.
So there's a guy, I call him a philosopher. He calls himself a scientist. But he talks about the differences between the left and the right. conservatism versus liberalism.
Sure.
And this is him, but he says it's the difference between the masculine mind and the feminine mind. And I wish I could take credit for this, but someone once told me that the left views violence as a dial, right? It could be, there's no on or off switch. It may be at 1, it may be at 10, right? But it can be dialed up and it can be dialed down. And the right views violence as a light switch. It's either on or it's off.
Yeah,
and so it's an interesting way to view this. And yeah, the real problem for the left has been arming up.
Yeah,
when we know this, they're probably still 10 to 20 years behind where conservatives are. Another problem is that so many on the left are trying to buy firearms. There's just none to be found.
Yeah.
Dude, between COVID and in this massive rush, same with ammunition.
Yeah.
But so the problem is, once the left, are they going to get to a 5, a 6, a 7? What's gonna flip the switch?
Yeah.
For the right.
Yeah.
And there are guys like he goes by Aesop, and Matt Bracken's a SEAL. I actually might have him on this podcast.
Please do.
Interesting guy, and they say, look, what we're going to see is going to be like Rwanda times Yugoslavia. That's the level of violence that they see coming in the United States. I'm probably not there yet.
Yeah.
That's like an extreme scenario, but it's on the sphere somewhere.
It is. It's not.
It's not outside the realm of possibility. So at any rate, I can't answer that question right now. I don't know. I don't know what's actually, if there was a Steve Scalise shooting today, like that whole thing against the GOP Congress members, if that were to happen in 2020 or 2021,
I think that would be it.
Matt Bracken is the one who the former SEAL. He's the one who talks about a dirty civil war where it's primarily low intensity. You can't stop it. There's no really organized line. It's like a battle royale. Someone the other day said that this is actually pretty good too. Is the coming domestic conflict or the current domestic conflict is not going to be team deathmatch. It's going to be battle royale.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's a bunch of competing teams. There's not just A versus B.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many layers to this conflict: class, race, politics, ideology, rural versus urban. Lots of dynamics at play here. They may be right.
I tend to think they are, and man. What a beautiful dial versus a switch. That's what it is, right? It was like when I used to be a bouncer at this mega bar here in Maryland. I mean, there's like 100. When I worked as a bouncer in college, there'd be like 3 or 4 of us. At this bar I worked at in 2011, they'd have 150 of us on. It's a different beast of a bar. Point being is like the rule is like you cannot touch them unless they touch you, right? And so it would be the entire night. It would just be like you kind of be forming a wall and pushing people out. And yeah, you go for like 8-9 hours of people screaming or throwing straws at you, and you couldn't do it. And finally, someone would just, they would dial it up a little more, and some guy would smack someone, and then you would just see, you'd see an elbow to the eye socket, and you'd see someone dropped, and then their friends would try to jump in, and they would get dropped, and it was the dial versus the light switch, and it was like, but the thing is it's because no one's seen the light switch. I think a lot of them don't think it's there. And
right.
I don't want it to be used. Again, I'm not jerking off to Civil War Part 2. Like, no, who in their right mind is? But I also know a lot of men like Dale, who is just one, God knows how many more there are like him, that are like, dude, I'm not gonna fucking see my place get torn up. I don't mean my home, I mean my literal country. There's been too much blood shed for this utopia. It is, and for everyone that doesn't like it, no, it's not perfect, but god damn it, there's a reason why people still emigrate here from all over the world, including one of the guys I worked with at that bar, Ivan, 6'4", Mr. Bulgaria, moved to America as soon as he could. Prince from Kosovo moved to America as soon as he could. There's a reason why this place is the way it is. and it is worth defending. And you're going to have a bunch of these hyper alpha types, these men of action that don't give a fuck, that are not me. I am admittedly a little too optimistic. I'm a little too friendly. I give people too much of a benefit of a doubt. That is my flaw. There are a lot of guys like Dale and Ted-Eye that don't have that. And they don't have that at all. And they've lost too many other men overseas in conflicts defending this place from actual armed men, that they're not going to sit by and see a bunch of skinny jean wearing man bun fucks who think that they're going to roll over because, you know, we are the Viva la Revolution, Orange Man bad. And like, again, I'm not saying I'm for that, but I'm telling you, I have no way of stopping those guys. Like, good luck, you know? It's like, hey, don't let your Rottweiler off the chain. If anyone, it's like what I said when Dale's on here. This isn't my podcast when Dale's here. I put the keys in the ignition and I get into the passenger seat and I tell him, hey, I think we got about an hour of fuel, and I buckle up, right? I tell 911 to stand by. That's what happens. The same thing is going to happen. So it's kind of like people on the left are like, don't group us in with all like the revolutionaries in the streets. And I'm like, I won't, but you better understand that when people on the far right crack back, I have just as little ability to hold them back as you do. So, yeah, I don't see it ending well. But because I'm an optimistic, naive, gullible, doe-eyed bitch, I hope that there are one or two outcomes. The worst outcome, but that could still be good, is that it does pop off somewhere. There is a brief conflict, and that it's enough to sort of scare everyone. Everyone goes, what are we doing? What are we doing? And I know that's optimistic. My second is, what is the silver bullet? How do you evade all of this? How do you move? How do you go 4 chess moves ahead? I think it's a COVID vaccine, because right now it's very easy to be indifferent. Hear me out. It's very easy to be indifferent when you're stuck at home and you're getting checks in the mail. But if you can get everyone back to work, to some sort of normality after seemingly it being gone forever, I think you're going to have a lot of undecided people all of a sudden be anti-riot. Going, whoa, now it's back. Now we're at my office. Like, stop burning shit. Again, naive. You gave me the head shake now. What's your 2 cents?
No, I'm sorry. I should be more open-minded. No, you're right. I should have heard you out.
No, fuck that, dude. Do whatever you want, man. Free speech.
Well, no, just from an analytical perspective, I'm trying to approach everything as if I were a complete beginner. When you begin a new book, you start a new hobby or develop a new skill, you're just like a sponge. Like, all right, let me just absorb everything about this. So I'm trying to approach just about everything in life as a beginner. But and that includes arguments. There are a few problems that I have with that.
Sure. And
that is, number one, there's already substantial 30-40% of the U.S. population who say they're not going to take the vaccine. Okay. Well, what happens when Biden gets elected and now a vaccine is mandatory? So that's another potential rift for conflict, for low intensity conflict. That's number one. Number two, I have pretty grave concerns about the future of the dollar. According to a J.P. Morgan study, the lifespan of a world reserve currency, or the lifespan of a currency as world reserve, is about 100 years. For the past 400 plus years, world reserve currencies have only lasted for currencies holding world reserve have only held it for between 80 and 110 years, roughly. Well, if we start with 1940, 44, whatever Bretton Woods was.
I thought you were going to say Woodrow Wilson, 1919. I was thinking of the banks.
No, the Bretton Woods system, basically, that's when the U.S. dollar began to be the world reserve currency.
Okay.
And that was really the beginning of the end for the British pound as world reserve currency.
Okay.
In the 30 years that followed the end of World War II, as Great Britain was losing their colonies all around the world to revolution and independence movements, the British pound lost 50% of its value over the course of 30 years.
Okay.
That's what happened at the end of their tenure as world reserve. Well, if the average age the average tenure of a world reserve currency is 100 years, and we start with 1945, roughly, say 19. Bretton Woods was 40 or 44, somewhere in there.
Say 75 years.
It wasn't 40. Right. So in the next 80 to 110 years, basically, yeah, within the next 4 to 20 years, roughly, we very well could see the end of the U.S. dollar's world reserve currency. And when international demand for the dollar is sapped, then we are going to have massive inflation, massive devaluation of the dollar. That's going to radically change everything. We also get into the work of Sir John Glubb. He's got a little essay called "The Fate of Empires," and he was a British intelligence officer in World War I. He was knighted. He's Sir John Glubb, so he's not like just some schmuck. And he found that the lifespan, the age of the average empire is only 250 years, roughly 2 generations. In the United States here, at 244 years, give or take, maybe 244 out of 50. So we could be nearing the end of the U.S. empire, and again, maybe the U.S. dollar losing its global reserve status and the end of the United States empire will coincide. And if that is the case, that doesn't lead me to believe that we're going to have peace domestically, right? That's not a peace and tranquility type of period of history.
Okay.
And then just lastly, and we also have an industrial revolution going on. What is the fourth industrial revolution? Where
automation
20, 30, 40, maybe up to 50% of Americans lose their jobs over the coming next several decades due to automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. That to me is not a peace and tranquil. That doesn't produce peace and tranquility. Even if we have universal basic income, because that's so. At any rate, I just look at the next 5, 10, 20 years and I say, it doesn't look great. If history is a guide,
yeah.
Right? That's the outside view.
Yeah.
Combined with the inside view of what's happening now, and I don't know, man. I think it's virtually unavoidable. I don't think there is a panacea to any of this stuff.
Yeah. So when does it pop off? November
Well, I think
4th?
it probably already popped off in 2016.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of seems like
But certainly November to January, I think it's going to be incredibly tumultuous.
Fuck. Fuck. I'm trying.
Well, I hope that didn't black pill you, because maybe I'm just full of shit and I'm completely wrong.
No, dude. I just like I have on my liberal friends on this podcast to challenge my beliefs. Yeah, I like to talk to people like you and Dale, General Spaulding. I like to have on people that don't paint the silver lining. They don't look at it with rainbows. I like that because it brings my rainbows down to earth, right? I like to have on my liberal friends who have more rainbow in their vision than me, and I tried to, it's kind of like the saying, you have to have the dreamers and the realists. Without the dreamers, the realists would never leave the ground, but without the realists, the dreamers would float off into nothingness, and it's a balance, right? It's almost like a hot air balloon. You don't want to be on the ground, right, but you don't want to be in space. So I'm trying to look at that as have them on, and I try to see like the beautiful side of things, and like why can't we all just get along? And then I have on you and Dale, who shovel black pills down my throat and end up my ass with no lube, and then I say thank you, and I try to find the middle ground, and it's kind of cliche and cheesy, but I think it's prepare for the worst but hope for the best. I think it's, or as Elon said on his first Rogan episode, was I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than be pessimistic and right, because if you're pessimistic and right, like, why do you even get out of bed? What do you get out of told you the world sucks? It's like, why are you celebrating that? Not you, well, Sam. I mean, using Elon.
No, but I'll tell you the reason why is because
be real, be a realist.
Because this is an opportunity.
Okay.
This is an opportunity to right a lot of wrongs. And look, America, this continent's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a new form of government. Hopefully we're not trading one tyranny for another.
Yeah.
But for a lot of us, it's like that cycle, good times create weak men, weak men create, right? So we are definitely going into like good times create weak men create hard times. Like we're there.
Maybe we come out better.
Well, that's an opportunity. And that's when I get out of bed.
Okay.
Is to say, hey, look, this is an opportunity. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Fucking grow.
But yeah, let's do this the right way this time around. Look, we got 250 years of history since the founding documents, roughly. We know where things went wrong. Let's just make it right next time.
Yeah. Yeah, right? It's like you can be born and be like, man, my dad's a World War I veteran. I grew up in the Depression, the Dust Bowl, and then World War II. Like I look at like my grandparents' generation, someone like my Uncle Rich, who I always bring up on this podcast, right? His uncle, I think, I always get it butchered, died on the Western Front. He was born into the Depression, granted not in the Dust Bowl, he was in New York. 18 years old, stormed Omaha Beach, survived, and then went and did 50 years in the FBI. Lived a long, beautiful life, and was hard as fuck. And raised in, a great family. Maybe that's it. Maybe it will be, because you look at, granted there's a lot more than just my idyllic simplifications of America, but I tend to try to look at it as like, the golden age of America, late 40s, 50s, 60s. There's a lot of things that played into it, but I don't think it can be excluded that I think a lot of people came back from little hell on earth, and building a corporation was a lot easier than storming German pillboxes, and a general gratification. And granted, it was also we were the only world superpower. We commanded the world's resources. Yeah. It's not, again, not as simple as I like to make it. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe it's, hey man, your grandpa Tommy's an asshole. It's like, well, fuck, dude. I mean, he was 11 for 9/11. He remembers he was 18 during the 2008 crisis, right? He remembers Trump. He remembers COVID. He remembers like the civil skirmish. Like, yeah, I think he's kind of happy that shit went back to normal in the mid-2020s, and that's why he was such an asshole to us growing up. I see where you're coming from. It's not everything sucks and there's nothing we can do, so, put a bullet to your temple, like, because I don't think anything good comes from that. It's like, maybe you're just a negative fuck, right? But I see how you're saying it. It's not good. We have a battle, but we can stay here or we can crawl out, right? It's like the mountain can't be, if the mountain is smooth, it can't be climbed, scaled, right? You got to have, or it's the philosophical, is it Hindu? Is it Buddhist? The 4 cycles of, like, there's infinite cycles in the universe, but it's each cycle is 4 stages, and I don't remember any of them, but I know the last one is Kali Yuga, and it's the most insane. But Kali Yuga is what happens right before tranquility. It happens or with an individual, Kali Yuga is when the life gets crazy, and then they become the Buddha. It's right before the peace. But first it has to get insane. You have to stare into the jaws of, who's it, Vishnu? I don't know. But yeah, I'm going off on a rant now, but it's maybe you're right. It's not going to be simple, but let's use this to grow. Well, let's not let it be in vain. Fuck. You're scaring me, Sam.
I hear that a lot.
All right, fair enough. What else? I got you for 20 more minutes. I'm milking this. I'm getting the most out of you. What else? What else is on your mind? What's on the plate? What's Can we step away from just the insanity right now? About Forward Observer. Where's that go? Granted the union doesn't dissolve. Where's Forward Observer going? What are you looking at as a business?
Well, we're a subscription business, so we have subscribers who pay us in basically they pay monthly or annually, and we provide them this service. We provide our view. We've actually grown. We've grown quite a bit since I started doing this in 2016. From 2016 to 2020 is a one-man show, and now we have 3 full-time guys doing this, and we're coming into. I mean, I almost hate to say this, but the worse things get domestically, the better business will get for us.
That is that's the moral qualm, right? Defense industry.
Because people have a lot of uncertainty, and what we do is we reduce uncertainty about the future, right? We start saying, hey, here are all the things that could happen. Here's what we think is probably going to happen. We could be wrong. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not, I wish I were. I wouldn't be running Ford Observer if I were 100%.
Yeah.
But here's some other outcomes that you can think about and plan for. And what I found is people will pay money for expertise.
Absolutely.
And so, we're trying to add a fourth guy right now, just because, again, November to January, I really do expect to be pretty tumultuous, and I'd like another set of eyes and another brain sitting in the office.
Do you have a physical office?
We do. Yeah.
I was going to say, well, I've had two guys on who are ex-Intel, and I know one of them is, I think, starting his own business, but I don't think I have no idea where he lives, and I doubt it's physically near you. So never mind, there goes that idea. But how do you find it compares, because what you said about fishing, you found out that you like fishing a lot more than you like bringing people out to fish. That was me with graphic design. I fucking love graphic design. Man, I like making my own crazy shit, like Marilyn Monroe riding a zombie horse naked with JFK firing an Uzi, and then people are like, I want a birthday card for my 4-year-old, and I'm like, and they're like, can you change the palette? I want a little more of a blue past, and I'm like, I'm gonna fucking kill myself. Fuck it, I'm starting a podcast. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Are you finding that with Forward Observer, or like my podcast? Is it? I'm like, oh, I can just do what I want and have who I want on. No one told me to have you on. Sam's not very well listening. Sam's not paying me. Sam's not sponsoring me. Fuck it, I want to talk to Sam today. That's what I'm fucking doing. Are you finding that with Forward Observer? That is it more like the podcast, or is it more like fishing and graphic design? Are you like, man, I like Intel. I fucking hate showing Intel.
Yeah. No, people say they're born to do things, and maybe a lot of people fall in this category. I was born to do whatever I wanted.
Hell yeah.
Like my first, I was going to go, a buddy and I, his name was Drew. He pissed hot at MEPS. Apparently he did drugs. Yeah. And he took a drug test at MEPS. This was as we were in the process of enlisting. And we both wanted to be Ranger medics. Yeah. And, I didn't, at the time, like, who knows, whatever happens, happens. I'm probably not tough enough to have been in Ranger Regiment.
Me neither, dude.
But well, maybe I was, I don't know. But so at any rate, yeah, where I'm going with this is I stumbled into intelligence. I found that, I was really good at it, but I think I probably could have been good at a lot of things, put 5-10 years of full-time effort into it. Oh yeah. And like, I read about intelligence for fun. Like, I really enjoy learning, and I probably could have done that literally in any industry. Yeah. In any job. Yeah. Just about. But, I just happened to, so I went to MEPS, and I was like, well, fuck, I don't want to go to Ranger school by myself. Yeah. So at any rate, I sit down with the guy, and he's like, he looks at my ASVAB scores. He's like, all right, pick a job in the Army. I'm like, well, what are my options? It's like, yeah, you scored a 96 on the ASVAB. Just pick any job you want. I was like, well, do you have a list? And he's like, yeah. Well, he hands me like 10 pages of MOSs. And I'm like flipping through it. I'm like, oh, counterintelligence. What is this? What is that about? He's like, oh, it's basically James Bond. And I'm like, that sounds cool.
Let's fucking do it.
And so he's like, okay, well, if you want this, you can't ship today. You got to go back home. You got to come back as like a week or something later. I was like, well, I'm already here. Like, I'm packed. Let's just do it. And so, then, I had to come back or something like that. I forget exactly. So, and he was like, here, we got an intelligence analyst billet. And I'm like, what's that? He's like, yeah, it's basically James Bond too. I'm like, okay, let's go do that. It's not at all like James Bond, right? So that's how I stumbled into intelligence. So at any rate, I get burned out a lot with this job. Yeah. Just because it's processing every single day. Just like, what are these latest guys talking about? And, the latest indicators, and what does this mean? And all this stuff. I get burnt out, but I'll tell you, I'm almost to the point now. I'm like, well, okay, we know the next, 2 to 3, 5, maybe even 10 years is going to be an absolute shit show. Why am I still trying to decipher all of minute details? What I really love is I love teaching people how to run intelligence networks. And it just so happens that in the preparedness community, the Patriot community, whatever, if we're going to get through the other side, people, you've got to have intel guys, right? You have to have people looking for information, putting the puzzle pieces together and saying, hey, this is what we think the picture looks like. And then on the operations side, you say, okay, great. Thanks for informing me about what the battle space looks like and what the enemy may do in the future. Here's how we're going to prioritize and execute on the operations side to deal with what intelligence told us. So all these people out buying guns and ammo and getting 7 years of food in the basement and all this other stuff, I'm not knocking you. I'm just saying, bro, you got to have information.
Yeah.
Like, you have to maintain. It's not even situational awareness. What you really need is situational understanding.
Yeah.
Situational awareness says, hey, there's this bad thing out there. You should know about it. Situational understanding is there's this bad thing out there, and these are the kinds of problems that he's having. This is what we expect him to do in the future, and here's how you can influence that and eliminate the threat, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was I had on active Colonel Tyler Mortensen. I always get it fucked up. Morton. And he wrote a book called From Kites to Cold War, and it's all about ISR, airborne ISR. And but I think one of the quotes is in it is, I don't remember, I think it was from Eisenhower, it might have been from LeMay, but it was after a certain I guess reconnaissance run. He came back and when looking at the data, said something along the line, because you always talk about energy density, right? That's why a thermonuclear weapon is so amongst the other obvious things, because it's a nuclear bomb, but it's the energy density that you have this thing that you can put in a single plane and you can get rid of a city, versus you need 1,000 planes all with you got to drop 1,000 tons of conventional bombs. So it's all about energy density, which one blows up bigger with the smallest footprint. And he said the most energy dense weapon is a camera. Said that is, in terms of lethality, he said there's far more. He goes, with 1 pound of camera lens aperture is the equivalent of 1,000 tons of high explosives. And that just makes me think of kind of what you're saying, intelligence. You can have all these bombs, all these bombers, all these tanks. Man, if you don't have a God's eye view, if you don't know where you're going, what you're doing, manipulating in real time, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. And so I thought I saw this. I might just be my mind making shit up. Do you have a podcast?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to plug that because I've had a lot of people asking me about you, specifically about you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. No, I fucking thank them, man. So, yeah, I thought I saw it. Is it on YouTube? Because I saw links for it on your website, Forward Observer.
Yeah, so the audio version is, it's semi-regular. It's like on all the major podcast platforms. I don't publish every episode to the YouTube channel, but sometimes I think if something really needs to be on YouTube, because in terms of followers, I have a lot more followers on YouTube than I do on any podcast platform.
Yeah. I don't think I have any on podcast platforms, but yeah, I've had more people interested in you than me. They're like, oh man, this podcast is cool. I'm like, thanks. They're like, oh no, not you, the guy you had on. I was like, fuck. But no, man, don't fucking apologize, dude. That just means I gotta work harder. But yeah, I thought you'd like that. They're like, yeah, that's a cool guy. And I was like, yeah, he's coming back on. I'm like, oh, tell me. And I'm like, I did another episode. And they're like, I don't care about that one. Tell me when Sam's on. I'm like, all right, fuck it. All right, fuck me. I'll just go crawl into a hole and die. But yeah, man. Have you thought about doing more of that on a more regular basis to sort of balance out the burnout feeling? Because the burnout feeling sucks. I used to get that all the time with graphic design. I would burn the fuck out at my job stocking fucking liquor shelves. I love the people I work with. I legitimately do. But I get burned out just doing the same thing. This podcast is my little escape, whether it's talking to you, whether it's talking to Dale, whether it's talking about the history of pornography, which was a cool episode. This is what keeps me balanced. And in turn, going to work keeps me balanced from just talking nonstop here. Have you thought about doing more podcasts? If anything, shit, man. People hear you talk. I mean, there's a way to lure people into your business model, right? Because I don't sell anything. Here's my podcast. It's all out here. You would hear me talk and, X number of dollars. you can get this package, right? Because you have monthly plans and annual plans. Have you thought about, not to just tell you what you're doing now, Sam, this is what you're fucking doing, but have you thought about doing more podcast episodes more frequently, as a way to balance out burnout, but also to direct traffic?
Yeah, I have. For a period, I don't know, for maybe a couple months, I used to do like 4 to 5 shows a week.
Yeah.
And they're just 30 minutes, long enough for me to get on there and really hammer a topic and say, okay, I'll be back later.
Yeah.
But, and then I have like a meeting one day, or I got to go somewhere. And so the thing gets messed up. And so I ended up scaling back to like, 1 or 2 a week, basically.
Yeah.
But who I really like, and what this kind of reminds me of, is John Batchelor.
Okay.
The John Batchelor Show out of WABC in New York.
Okay.
And he's got a podcast. But those clips, they're like 5-15 minutes. And he has some like phenomenal guests on there.
Yeah.
And it's like just enough. You get just enough information to like get your mind blown. Like, oh, I had no idea.
Okay.
And, well, they're segments or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. And yeah, I would love to actually have like a daily radio show.
Yeah.
But, I know you run into this. It's tough to do. Like, you don't have a producer. You don't have sound engineer. You don't have any staff. Like, you're doing everything. You're doing all this stuff yourself and trying to do a show, and it's just tough.
It's exhausting. It's right. Which is why I've had people ask. They're like, oh, you just go with that sort of raw, organic. I'm like, dude, if I had to put a single more minute into this, I wouldn't do it. So I keep it. I stop screen recording. I compress it from 4K to 1080. I put it in iMovie, and all of my sound design is, I press the little wand. It makes the audio sound better. Export that bitch, and I upload it overnight because it takes like 10 hours to upload. Yeah, you can't. If you make it too complex, you can't. I found you can't do it. You burn out, right? It's like keeping a realistic workout schedule or something. But yeah, on that note, with clips is. Yeah, Lex Friedman does that a lot, the artificial intelligence guy. He's had on like Elon Musk, Commander Fravor, the UFO guy. He's been on Joe Rogan. But yeah, I definitely get that, because you don't always have time to. For me, like, if I'm going to listen to a podcast that like regularly puts out like hour-plus long episodes, that's probably going to be the only podcast I listen to. You can't do multiple of those a day. But clips, yeah. I don't have the fucking time to do it, but I think that's what you're getting at, right? Just do little episodes, short episodes.
Yeah, like 10 to 30 minutes. Just interview a guest, interview an expert. The really great thing about John Batchelor is he's extremely learned, and so like he knows enough about these topics to like ask insightful questions. Yeah. And so it's like me, if I were questioning a former agency analyst or ops officer or whatever, like I could probably ask some pretty insightful questions, but you put me in front of a nuclear scientist and I'm like, how does this thing explode?
Yeah.
Right? Like what makes it so big?
What makes the boom? Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel talking to you, man. I'm like, fuck, intelligence. It's when I have on guests that write books, I'm not kidding you. I'll listen to them. I guess this is the pre-med side of me. I'll listen to the audiobook 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a row to get an idea of like what I'm having on Rob Manning on Thursday, the chief engineer of the NASA Mars Curiosity rover. Holy rocket science fuck, dude. I'm listening to that and I'm like, man, I can normally piece together some questions, right? I feel like I've talked to Dale enough that I can kind of pull out an interesting conversation with you. I don't know anything about intelligence. I'm like, I can stumble through this. I don't know how I'm going to get on that, man. Composites of wheels, of re-entry, Delta V. I'm like, Jesus. I think I'm going to last about 5 minutes before I default into, like, how many aliens have you seen on Mars, sir? Like, when China sends rovers there, too, are we going to have battle bots on Mars? Are we going to have weapons on her? So, God bless. I hope I stick with it, but,
yeah, right.
Man. Yeah, man. But, yeah, let's wrap this bitch up, because I got to go to work, and, thanks for doing it, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for sitting through my stupid questions, and, for everyone that comments, I swear too much. I swear when I don't know what to say. It's a tick, all right? So all those F-bombs for everyone listening that doesn't like it, too bad. But thanks for doing it, Sam. ForwardObserver.com. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed this. I like the long form kind of free flowing.
Dude, I like it. Yeah, it's the only way I can do it, man. I can't. I get the admiration, or I get the draw of the short clips, but for me, I don't feel that it starts flowing organically. If it's someone that I haven't done an episode with before, like I wouldn't count the one I did with you and Dale, because that was Dale and Ted I were there. If I don't have someone on the first time, it takes like 30 to 45 minutes before it starts kind of flowing a little more, you know? Because at first it just kind of seems like, this is my thing and this is what I say, and then this is my thing and this is what I say, and it kind of starts to, you get that sort of, and the longer you go, they start to get they get much more easy. But then, and you will be back on, when they come on a second time, a third time, I always sound so fucking gay. I'm always like, the first one's like a first date, and then it's like, dude, all your guests are guys, and I'm like, just don't look into that. It gets easier, you get a little more comfortable, and it's the longer episodes are definitely where and there's different like energies. We have on 2 people, there's like a little more kind of dynamic. Sometimes 2 people gang up on one person, like the last episode we were all shitting on Ted-Eye. When there's 4 people, it gets a little hairy, it gets a little crazy. Yeah, there's different energies, there's different, but you got to do long form, because otherwise everyone's kind of just shouting out sound bites, right? Here are my facts and figures, and it's like, you gotta ease into it. But on that note, I'll shut up. Thanks, Sam. And
all right, thanks, Tommy.
Yeah, I think if you want, I meant to mention, the podcast that the guy I had on last week, and then I went on his show, Don the Plebe. He's the one he wanted your email. He wants you to come on his show.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'll send you the episode that he was on mine, and then when I was on his, I'll send those both to you. He's a cool fucking dude. He's gonna come on and meet Dale. But yeah, he wants to talk to you. So.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Let's do it.
And he's much better at interviews than I am. So it'll be, if you could do this, you can definitely do his.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
All right, my man. Stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy. God bless America. And if you're a dirty communist, go fuck yourself. Peace, Sam.
Yeah. See ya.
Later, buddy.